and call the committee meeting to order. This is the Public Infrastructure Special Committee. Would like to do some introductions very quickly. Neil Dobler, District 7.
Tony Emerson, District 4.
Bill Finder, City of Topeka Planning and Development.
Brian Faust, City Engineer.
Jehan Zeb, Infrastructure Planner, Department of Public Works.
Hello, Braxton Copley, Deputy Director of Utilities.
Taylor Ricketts, I guess it's Taylor Wolf now, sorry. Forgot.
Old habits die.
Yeah. Multimodal Transportation Planner.
Jackie Vogel, Deputy Director, Public Works.
Liz Toyne, City Council Assistant.
Dan Hanover, Business Services Manager for Public Works.
Anna Ulrich, Deputy Director of Public Works.
Mary Feeney, Legal.
Thank you very much. We are short-handed today. We knew one council member, Councilman Lesser, would not be here. Councilman Padilla, we're not totally sure about. So we are not able, on advice from legal counsel, to take action with just two of us right now. So we're going to put off the approval of the minutes. And Bill, I'd like to move item 3 to the end and just see if we can get another. I guess I'd ask one question first. How quickly do you need that resolution of support?
The resolution would come before council later in October, so if this committee meets again before the last council meeting in October,
Okay.
we could do that.
Okay, or we could call a
Yeah.
special meeting, just a Zoom meeting perhaps with one action item. And
That would be
get
fine,
approved.
yes.
So, okay. All right, so we are going to move to item number 4, which is asset management system overview. Brian?
If we could get a PowerPoint number 4. I'd like to introduce Jehan. He's our infrastructure planner for Public Works. He's been working on our asset management system for the last year or two, and he has a presentation to talk about where we're at right now, as well as to discuss the PCI status for 2016 and 2019. So with that.
So thank you. I'm Jehan Zeb, and I will be presenting today the Topeka Asset Management System. Next slide, please. So in today's agenda, I will be giving a brief overview of where we at the asset management system. So asset management system, the system name came in 2014. It's an asset management program. So the standard ISO 55000 uses systems. We will just define in the next slide. So I will just give you a brief overview of that. And then in the second point, we will be discussing the pavement management system, like where we at the pavement management. So pavement management is just 1% of the overall asset management system. Those are some of the definitions we will be keep on using throughout the presentation. So those are the definitions taken from the ISO 55000 standard. So assets are something of value, potential value for the organization, and for which they have the responsibilities. It includes both the municipality owned and contributed assets. Contributed assets are the ones completed by the developers and then handed over to the city for operation and maintenance. Asset systems includes all the group of assets within an overall service area which perform the intended service or function for the specific area. Asset management is the set of activities the organization take to realize value from the assets, and it includes the inventory management, condition assessment, life cycle assessments, risk performance management, and so on, a lot of activities. Asset management system, as per the standard, includes the management systems for asset management, and that includes the policies, procedures, the frameworks, and the information systems. So the software component is just, I would say, 1 or 2 or not more than 3% of the asset management system. And the second part of the presentation deals with the pavement condition assessment. So there's the definition of the pavement condition index. So it's measure the physical condition of the streets in terms of the pavement condition index, and it ranges from a 0 to 100, where 0 is worst, with 100 is excellent. And it measures the type, extent, and severity of different distresses. For flexible pavement, there are 17 different types of distresses, and for the rigid pavement, there are 18 different types of distresses. This measure is part of the pavement condition index. Next. So when we started our program, asset management program, so initially we started with the 5 service areas in the public works, which included street, bridges, traffic, facility, and fleet. But later on, when we gave presentation to the steering committee, so then we added utilities, so water, wastewater, and stormwater. So initially when I started the program, so I was just, it was started all the 8 areas from the scratch, and we did all those boxes filled for all our service areas. But later on, street was on the focus, so almost in the middle, then I just focus only on streets. So right now I'm working on asset management plan for the street component. So those are the 6 different steps, or you can say components, and this is the methodology that is, I would say, indigenous, because we developed this. We published this in one of the conferences in 2016. It's in line with the ISO 55000 standard, and we are implementing it. So the first step is the maturity assessments, the gap assessments. So we did that in line of the ISO 55000 standard. 92 different questions were asked from focus groups in all of those 8 areas, and then we consolidated those results, and then we assessed where we are with respect to our asset management program, or where we are on those 92 different best practices. And then from there we identified our gaps, and then we developed our roadmap and started developing our program. The second step is the development of the asset management policy. We didn't have that policy. We defined that, and it's now approved. And the good thing is that we started the program because the accreditation now, the coming in 2022, requires Chapter 40, and they included asset management, and all those components now they are asking us to be part of that accreditation. So it's good that we have started that. And the third step or component is the asset management strategic plan. So that activity is also completed right now. And one of the core components in the strategic plan is to define the strategic objectives for the asset management and align those with the strategic objectives of our organization. So the green boxes are complete right now, and I'm working on the asset management plan for each of those individual asset areas. So this is the core of the asset management, and it has a lot of boxes, so I don't want to confuse you with that, but the 4 in the asset management plan is the first is the development of the infrastructure report card, like the US Fed and provincial, the state departments are developing for their own assets, so it's like that. So for each of the service area, we will be developing the infrastructure report card. And then the second is the desired level of service. What should be our level of service? So for that, I'm developing a risk management framework and a level of service framework, and make our all decisions for investment planning regarding infrastructure, regarding those infrastructure should be based on the level of service framework. And those level of service framework we will be defining based on 3 perspectives. One is the organizational perspective, then the customer perspective, and the asset perspective. Third is the asset management strategies. So I will be just moving on to the next slide, and then I will show you like what I meant by that. And then toward the end, once we have done all that, so from where our funding should come, and that it should be the financing plan for each asset. So you can see like how for the next 20, 30, or even 40 years, and where the kinks are, and from where the funding should come to support those asset management program. This is the infrastructure planning process. So I just, on the next slide there is the one which is the detailed one, but this is, I just made an abstract one so that to avoid most of that sub or minor activities. So this is a similar process. This is a generic process as part of our SOP I have developed for the infrastructure planning process, and those are the abstract steps like how we should be doing our planning across the organization for all type of assets. But over here, a slightly focus is on the street. So the first step is to update our inventory after completing all our capital projects, how this process is to be done, and SOPs developed for the first step. Then is the asset condition, how to do the condition assessment, and when to do the frequencies, and all those rating criteria are developed over here. The third step is the system updates. So we have a lot of different type of systems that include the GIS, the Cityverse, so all those systems are updated. And then in the third step is we just brought in the ascetic model for infrastructure planning. So this is our moving forward way of doing this, developing that program. So in the third step, we are running that model. Then we are generating the maintenance and rehabilitation report that include the reconstruction projects as well. And once the report is generated, then we will edit it, like how computer decisions and field decisions are related to each other. Next. So this is the same process, and based on this is our SOP for infrastructure planning process, and the same is implemented with a slight modification for the utilities, but almost same process we are using. So on the first slide, on the abstract slide, we have developed the maintenance and rehabilitation program. Now we have other like capacity-related projects or growth-related projects. So we are identifying that as part of the infrastructure, from the infrastructure plans. And once we have that included, the capacity-based, growth-based projects, and the maintenance and rehabilitation-based projects, then we consult that with the street department if they have some sort of request in the Cityverse. So they ask and they request the city engineer, and then we include those projects. So now, at this point, we have very comprehensive our capital improvement program. So this is something regarding the infrastructure planning and on the asset management program. So as part of that, we are doing the condition assessment as part of our pavement management program on a 3-year cycle. So the whole condition of all streets are assessed throughout the city for all different types of streets on a 3-year cycle. So if you can see on the left side is our 2016 data, and on the right side we have a PCI value for the 19 data. And the PCI increase is from 54 to 65%. And on the left side, if you see, we have a lot of orange color and yellow color. So yellow is fair and orange is poor. And on the other side, if you see, so we have a lot of green and dark greens. So greens are good and dark greens are excellent or very good. The same thing is another comparison is the percentage-wise comparison. So you can see 2016 and 19. So we have reduced the very poor, fair, and poor, and increased the greens from 18 and 11% to 21 and 24%. So I think we are progressing in the right direction. Next slide. This is another comparison where we have compared various road classes, and even within the local, collector, and arterial, you can see a PCI improvement in each type of road class from 2016 and 19. This is another comparison where we compared an asphalt, concrete, and concrete PCC pavements, and for local collectors and arterials. And if you compare 16 and 17 for both type of road classes and surface types, so you can see an improvement from 2016. The existing approach for street selection is that once we get the PCI values, then we create a map, the one you just saw, and then based on those ranges, the city engineer along with his team then manually picks up, okay, this is the range, and when it's above 86%, so we are not doing anything. When it ranges from 56 to 85%, then we are doing the preventive maintenance treatments. And once it's between 20 and 55%, then we are doing rehabilitation, and when it triggers 20 or below, then we have reconstruction. So the condition maps are developed, and manually everything is picked, and once the program is done, then it is shared with the street operations department, and if they have some inputs, if they have some projects to identify, so then they just give the request to the city engineer. They just have then a very good work program for the next 1, 2, or 3 years. The moving forward approach is that next, or from this year, we are the 2019 data is already there. We are validating that, and once that is done, we will upload this to the ASCETEC model, and the decisions for the streets, the service criteria, the second one. So the decisions still will be made based on the pavement condition index. We have data collected for pavement roughness index, but most probably we will be using this once our model is refined for high volume roads, and we are just looking forward to use their data for our arterials. Our treatment trigger criteria is when different types of treatments are to be applied. So in the next slide, I have the example for that, but we are using 2 criteria right now. One is the road class and the surface type. So in road class, we are considering 3 local, arterial, and collectors. And on the surface type, we have 3 types. One's brick pavement, and concrete, and asphalt concrete. So once those service criteria and triggers are defined in the ASCETEC model, then we run the scenario analysis. So one of the scenario is, for instance, the council ask us, okay, this is your budget, $24 million. So what best we can do within that $24 million? So this scenario analysis is done. And as a result of that, the capital program will be developed, and it will give us at least like a lot of other information, but that 3 is important. So one is the treatment type. So surface seal we are doing how much, and the mill and overlay and reconstruction projects, how many we are doing that, what should be the cost of that, and the schedule. First year, second year, third year, 4th year, and it depends on the time span, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, how many years you want, we can do that. Then the same work program is visualized in the GIS system, and then to best package that, just to have good contract, effective and efficient contract packages are developed. And the whole program is then validated and discussed with the street operations, and road will be identified, and the work program will be finalized accordingly. In the last slide is the decisions, how the decisions are made. So if you see, this is the one developed for the local streets. Same is developed for arterials, collectors, on asphalt. For like 3 of those curves are developed for asphalt, and then for PCC, and then for brick pavement, and the same will be uploaded to the aesthetic model for decision making. So the first is when the road is newly constructed, so the PCI value is 100. When it degrades to 70, then the first treatment comes in and it takes the PCI back to 85. It degrades with the passage of time to 55, and then surface seal and pitch is the second treatment. It takes it up to 70, and once the PCI gets to 30, then at this stage we do the mill and overlay, and it bumps it up to 90 again. And this whole cycle will go again till the end when the PCI value is 10. So the second time when those treatments are done, then we reconstruct the road once again, and the whole cycle is going on.
Question, what's the time frame you're looking for from 100 to reconstruct?
This is different for different roads. It's different. So for locals, we are looking for up to 50 years.
Okay.
Then for the collectors is different life cycle, and so the life cycle changes for concrete and for asphalt, and then within the road class is different for different. So this was the last slide, and if you have any questions, so.
All right, appreciate that presentation. Questions? I've got a couple.
Go ahead.
I'm interested in, I understand this was focused on pavement. That's good, and we know what the funding source is, at least fairly stable for the next 10 years maybe. I'm interested in how that interacts. So maybe take facilities and fleet and even the plants out of the question right now. Between streets and the distribution system, the collection system for both water and wastewater, how are we integrating that all together? So we understand what the assets look like on the utility side, replacement schedules for those assets match up as much as possible with the street side of it.
And actually what our TSG department has done on that, they've created a heat map that show the PCI overlaid with the conditions of the underground utilities. And so it actually identifies hot spots where there's that overlap of where we have utilities that, whether it's storm or sanitary or water, that has a history that we need to replace. That when we overlay that with our streets that have the lower PCIs. And so we make sure that when we do this, that we try to work on those areas that benefits both of us. And so there's that added component. We're not in a box and just saying we're just doing our streets.
Right.
And 2 years later, Braxton comes in and says, I really got to replace this. So between TSG and that mapping, and we also have a pretty aggressive deal where we both work together. We have monthly meetings between Public Works and Utilities. And I just emailed Braxton this morning about a project coming up in 2022 to make sure he's aware that that's what we're thinking about, so he can look at his utilities within that area. Don't want to catch anybody by surprise. He does the same with us if they have an area at Prospect Hills. For example, we have a high water main break history. That wasn't on our radar as far as streets at this point in time, but we work together on those.
Good, thank you. Braxton, I hate to put you on the spot, but yeah, if you wanted to add to that, and then I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about the utility side of it.
Absolutely, I should probably go to Clyde.
Yeah.
So Just to add on to what Brian had indicated, about 3 years ago, we started a very formal process where in the fall, we get together all of the engineers for Public Works as well as all the engineers for utilities, and we look at our proposed CIP capital improvement programs that we're going to put in front of the governing body in the spring. And that has really allowed us to leverage, because I'll see something Brian has 5 years out and say, hey, I've got critical failure imminent on a storm sewer line under there. Any chance that we could move that up and make that a higher priority? So just wanted to go, in addition to our monthly meetings and the constant dialogue that we do have this formal process where we get both of our teams together and go through the proposed CIPs, look for opportunities as well.
I appreciate that. I think people generally don't understand how much behind the scenes work there is. You know, they see a new street being torn up, and a lot of times that's something that nobody anticipated. But for every one of those, there's probably 10 projects that have been coordinated. Could you talk a little bit about, I know the sanitary sewer system has had an ongoing process of evaluation for several years. The water system, you can speak to that a little bit, and then the storm system as well, if you would. Just a few words on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with the storm system. Approximately 4 years ago, we brought a third-party contractor in, Midland, that actually achieved for us mapping of our storm system. Prior to that, we did not even have our entire storm system in the ArcGIS system. We have started to do some television work. Most of that is we identify where we have an area where we have complaints. We go in and do a condition assessment of the storm. I've started with storm because it's the one that's lagging the most. We have currently, we're in the process of negotiating a scope. We're doing a comprehensive stormwater master plan for us. During the massive storm events that occurred at the very end of July, we had 20 different locations where we had complaints. We're in the process of doing hydrologic and hydraulic analysis of the systems in those areas. We will feed all of that into our stormwater master planning. I'm turning to the sanitary sewer system. Again, 3.5, 4 years ago, we had very little knowledge of the actual condition of our sanitary sewer system. We have commenced a very aggressive program of CCTV work, as well as a lining program. Lining is much more cost-effective than doing wholesale reconstruction, to the tune of $53 a lineal foot, as opposed to $200 a lineal foot. We knocked out last year. Highcrest was one of the areas that we did. We lined about 7 miles of pipe. We're in the process now. We've done massive CCTV work in the 12th Street corridor, getting ready for the major 12th Street project. We've identified some areas for some point repairs, as well as some areas for the lining. Lastly, on the water, that's the one where we've had the most success in terms of developing a system. We have leveraged through a third-party vendor known as Fracta, and we have developed a waterline model that actually has in it all of our distribution system, and that model basically does a consequence of failure and a likelihood of failure analysis, and then a hybrid of the two of those, which is a business risk exposure. So as part of our $6.5 million waterline replacement program, we sit down with our operations staff, because I absolutely value their opinion, as well as our entire team, including our engineering staff, and then we look at where is going to be the best opportunity that we have based on the business risk exposure for the water lines to help us make good data-driven decisions.
Thanks, Braxton. Appreciate that. Questions?
Yeah, I guess my question was, so right now we're doing a manual process, and I think one of the points you made was we're going to go to more of computerized, kind of like Mr. Copley was just saying about how water, well, I guess utilities, I guess it's actually just water now, has a consequences of failure, and they have a model basically. Do we do the same thing on streets, or does your system take that into account? And by that, I mean, a lot of people, our arterial streets are what most people are driving on, right? And that's when, people come through town and they say your streets are terrible. It's because they go down 29th between California and Adams Street, and it's, and it has a lot of issues. But do we do that, or are we taking that into account with our reconstruction, that streets that are higher use, we might try to hold them to a higher standard?
For the risk management, so I'm working on developing a risk management framework for all assets, for all those 8 service assets and all those 8 service areas. So it's not yet developed, number one. So once that is done, so I'm also thinking on to transform our decision making, not only on the risk management, but how risks affect our service area, our services. And then our level of service, I'm connecting that with the team for decision making. So that's one part. So the level of service framework and risk management framework I'm working on. Once that is done, so we will be doing all our decision making based on the level of services, impacts to the level of services because of the risk management. So that's one part. Second is for the, specifically for the pavement management, is the aesthetic model. The decision making right now is done only on condition assessment. So they are, maybe in the next version, we talk to them and they will be implementing the risk framework as part of the system. So we are heading toward in that direction. So for the, back to the question for the city level investment planning. So we already developed capital investment planning framework, where how a project should be identified, how it should be coordinated, and how it should be selected. So it's published now. We publish this as a APWA magazine. So that process team, everybody has put a lot of effort into it. So this published in the APWA, and now last week it's published in one of the UK's journal. So like we are moving in the right direction, and specifically based on the program side of selection projects.
And that's important to us too, is to make sure that one of the components we look at is the road classification. Even when we were doing it manually, when you look at the CIP, understanding, Topeka Boulevard, starting in the core and working south, you'll see a road planned every couple of years, or a mile segment. We understand we need to make sure those are done. And that's what people see if you're coming in from Harlan Park and coming to the city, you're driving on Topeka Boulevard. You want that to look good. Same with 29th and 37th. And so we want to take that into account with our modeling also. It may weigh that a little bit more than a residential street. So.
If I can ask a bit. And your the timeline you gave, how often do you get feedback? I think you had like 10 or say over 50 years. I forget how many different times. So that says you're assessing it every couple years or something. Is there some? I guess I'm wondering what the feedback loop is to let you know when stuff needs done on.
Yes. So it's part of the strategic plan. The team has identified frequency for when it is to be done. So for the gap assessment, so we are doing it every 3 years, the first step.
Okay.
Policy, every 5 years. Asset management plan, so within the asset management plan, it would be updated every 5 years. But within the asset management plan, some focus areas says we will be updating our infrastructure report card every 2 years. Condition assessment for different assets are different. For instance, for streets, we are using a 3-year cycle, but for bridges, it is 2-year cycle. And that's how we define for every asset. So I have a comprehensive table, so it's the service areas and the type of assets and the type of documents and the type of activities, when it is to be done and by whom it is to be done. So it's already defined as part of the strategic plan, asset management strategic plan. So we define that.
And if I could add, When we do in 2016, when we had our first kind of data point, here's what our streets look like in this one point in time. Each year after that, we've been manually updating it. When we do a mill and overlay, we do a surface seal, we reconstruct. So each year in 2017 and 2018, we can rerun the model with those updated values. In 2019, we again hired a firm to come out to drive all of our streets to give that second really good data point for the entire transportation network. And what that's going to show us over time is kind of the degradation of our streets. We've made some assumptions when we started this out that our asphalt streets are going to degrade at a certain pace, concrete at a different pace. But these data points every 3 years are really going to help us define what do we have here in Topeka. And so each time we do that, we'll have better information.
And based on that, so every 3 years, once we get the new data, the plan for the preceding 3 or the succeeding 3 years will be updated at that point of what you're going to do.
Right, and I mean, we're actually updating it every year, quite honestly, because every year we've arbitrarily set when we do a mill and overlay, we go to 80. And so if we have a street that's, it's currently 50, we do a mill and overlay. It's not a new street, it's a mill and overlay. So we arbitrarily set that as 80 within the model, and then we rerun the model. And so each year when we do this, there can be minor changes to the program each year, not substantial, but there'll be changes every year.
Thank you.
Councilman?
Fine.
All right. I might note that Councilwoman Ortiz has joined us. Appreciate you being here. Yes, sir.
If I could add a couple things in Jahan's presentation, one of the things he talks about was validation, and we think that's critical when we're dealing with the computer. The computer is generating, this is what you need to do, but we also, the overused phrase of putting boots on the ground, we want to go out and look at that. Because we have found that sometimes what the model says to do is not the correct treatment for that road. And so that validation process is there. We're not going to blindly accept what comes out of the computer. So I want people to understand that. And we also, on his presentation, he talked about working with streets. We work good with our operations department and Jackie and Tony out there. We do ask them where they're having trouble. If we have 2 subdivisions that basically have the same PCI, but they're spending a lot more time in one, those are the ones we work with them on to tackle first. And so we have a good relationship with our operations too. So,
great. Really good information. I think part of the charge of this committee is to understand all of our infrastructure assets and the funding that accompanies that. So as we head into the CIP discussions, at least we have a pretty good understanding. I think this has been a great discussion on streets. I know we're not to the item where we set the agenda for next time, but I think it'd be good if we could walk through perhaps fleet and facilities, maybe a discussion of the treatment plants. Not necessarily all of this for the next time, but over the next couple of months. I think there's probably some other things that maybe signs and signals, something like that. So we get a good feel for all of the infrastructure in kind of little chunks. And the other piece of it is funding. So we've talked today about streets, and Brian, if you could just talk a little bit about the probably 2 major funding sources for streets.
right now, 2 major funding sources are citywide half-cent sales tax. There is another component, a countywide half-cent sales tax, which defines specific streets we do. Citywide does not define the exact streets that we're going to do. And then GO bond funding is another source that we have for our major street projects.
I'll be interested at some point to see how what the model says we need, and what's our goal as far as PCI now? Is that 70 or?
Actually, the council goal set back about 2 years ago was to actually try to get us to 60.
60.
And then with a desired level of 70.
Okay. So at some point we'll be able to mesh that. What kind of funding is it going to take us to get to or maintain that PCI goal? So I think that's pretty straightforward, and that'll help guide us in the CIP process next year, I guess. All right, I think we have a quorum now, so we will go back to item 2. We have before us the minutes from the September 8th meeting. Entertain a motion.
Move approval. Second.
All right, have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, item passes. And now we'll move on to item number, item number 3, resolution of support for the transportation grant, right? We're going to talk about bikeways projects. Mr. Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Every couple years, the state comes out with what is referred to now as Transportation Alternatives Program, grant program. In the past, it's been called other names, but last few cycles, good names. Yeah, they're good. We're on good terms. This year, so this cycle has come out in the fall. Normally, if you see any of our bikeway facilities out there in the city, they have been funded through this grant. We use our city funds to leverage, and it's usually a 20/80 match. So local match is 20%, the state match would be 80%. So all of our trails, all the bike lanes and sharrows and things that you see out there, that's in fact our most recent project on 8th Street, which is finishing up, connecting downtown to the medical district. That was a TA grant. So this year we had the fortune to update our bikeways plan over the course of the last 9 months or so to guide us in our future applications. The two priorities, or the top two, I should say, that came out of that updated plan was to have a more safe and low stress facility, a bike facility. And that involves separating that bike facility either physically or through more space. Sharing the road is something that you want to have in a very, very limited circumstances, certainly on our local roads. But when you get to a collector or any arterial, you need that separation for safety purposes, for all users. And then the other priority was just connecting our downtown and connecting our neighborhoods to downtown, as well as our trail system. The match that we use for the grant comes from the countywide sales tax to help implement the Bikeways Master Plan. So there's about $500,000 every other year that to be used out of that pot. So that's what we're anticipating in 2020. Actually, be next year is when we'll implement if we're successful. So the priority projects that came out of that updated action plan for the Bikeways plan are on the screen there. The map shows, I think 1 through 7 on the map are all downtown connections related. So you have a connection to the north on Kansas Avenue Bridge. You've got a connection to the east on East 6th. You've got a connection to the west on West 8th. And then you have a connection from the south from the Landon Trail, which is number 5 and 3 on that map. So those connect in a way that would potentially reallocate a vehicle lane for a for a bike lane and more separation. So those all have the potential for that. Engineering is currently undertaking a traffic study to look at capacity, any impact to capacity and level of service should we do that. So we'll know more in a few weeks what that says. That'll confirm or validate what we're thinking. But we do think all those connections would be made in a way that reallocates at least one of the lanes for vehicles right now. So that's the downtown connections part. These other part, there's two other, applications for the grant. The second one will be trail connections. So you see the green line on the map there. That's the Shunga Trail and the Landon Trail. So projects, which are 8 through 12 are on there. Again, one of the big things that we got out of our master plan update for bikeways is the community told us they wanted better connections to the trail. So that is what we're showing here. And I overlooked, there is also a connection being made, kind of a new connection, if you will. That's number 7, which is just north of the river. Yeah, right there. That is a connection along the north levee. So you would have a separated bike lane along the Kansas Avenue Bridge connected to a multi-use path that comes off of that bridge and connects to an enhanced levee surface for bikes and peds. So that is something we've worked with the riverfront folks on, and we had the opportunity, since we were doing something with Kansas Avenue Bridge, to maybe make that connection as opposed to just having it kind of isolated out there. So that's part of the application. The third sort of project in this overall application would be for Northwest Tyler. There is a current street project, that's project 13 and 14 up there at the top. There's a current street project that has already been approved in the CIP and in design. This would pay or ask for the part for the sidewalks and multi-use path, 10-foot wide multi-use path between Waddell and Lyman, and then also a connection, a 10-foot multi-use path connection to the Soldier Creek Trail over some land that the city owns. So that is, and we were successful actually last cycle on getting a multi-use path bridge for our 10th Street project just east of Wanamaker. So we feel like that's sort of it was a little bit bigger scope to this one, but we feel like that's has a good chance as well this time around. So all told, we're looking. So if you put all those projects together, we have about a $2 million project, of which we would ask 1.6 from KDOT for the grant. The city would end up matching a little bit over 400,000 for those. And I don't believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe we get any more credit if we do more, have more than 20%. Is that correct? Yeah. So that's why sometimes we get asked, well, could we put more into it? And the answer is we don't get any credit. We could, but we don't. Doesn't help our chance to get the grant. So with that, and typically we come back to the council for a resolution of support for these things. These are our again, every couple of years, these are our major ask for grants. So it does help the grant to show that support and alignment with our plans. So that's what's before you. We thought we'd bring this to the committee before it goes to the council for any comments.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Couple of quick questions. So these are basically federal funds passed through KDOT, right?
That is correct. Yeah.
How does the city interact with the county on these? Because the county actually owns the major trails, right?
That's correct. So the county, we come together, all the partners basically come together either through they come through the MTPO, but also our Complete Streets Advisory Committee, and we talk about these things together. The county has elected to make their priority, which totally supports all of our planning efforts for bikeways, the last connection between the Deer Creek Trail and Lake Shawnee. So they have a link. It's about a half mile, if less than that, between. Basically, they're gonna get their trail at Dornwood Park with a previous grant, TA grant, and so the new cycle would be connect basically from Dornwood Park down to 29th Street, where they have already built the 10-foot wide path that connects to Lake Shawnee, and that means basically you could get from Lake Shawnee all the way out to I guess 29th and Fairlawn, crossing I think 2 surface streets. So it's pretty amazing to make our system do that. So we come together. And then they support in another way. We've talked to them, for instance, on those trail connections, and they end up taking over the maintenance, I should say. So they would end up taking over the maintenance, much like that Levee Trail that is kind of new. We've talked to them about having us going ahead and putting in signage and the treatment of the surface to get it ready. Then they take it over, since they're the ultimate owners of that asset in the future. So that's
great. Thank you. Any other questions? So I guess at this point I would be looking for a motion to support the resolution of support that will be in front of the council at some point in October.
Mr. Chair, I'd go ahead and make a motion to support that resolution.
I second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. This will be a support for the resolution of support, I guess.
Double support.
Double support. Support squared. Thank you. All right, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. All those opposed? Motion passes. All right, I think we've been through everything. We're down to a draft agenda for the October meeting. I guess I'd look to fellow committee members for suggestions.
5B.
Oh, 5B, I'm sorry. Carry on.
This is a little bit of a repeat from the last meeting where we talked about projects coming up in 2021, but this does include some additional budget information for the projects. So we kept it in the same order as we do our pavement management plan. We go from preventive maintenance to major rehab to reconstruction to stopgap measures. The first one, the 2021 Surface Preservation Program, was approved in the CIP. It's $2 million. It went from a countywide sales tax over the last 3 years to 2021. It'll be the first year that it's actually funded through citywide sales tax. This is going to be used to crack seal and or joint seal arterials constructed within the last 10 years on the process of keeping our good roads good. Our collectors and arterials are the most expensive to reconstruct, and so it's important that we seal cracks early and keep our joints sealed. We don't anticipate a lot of microsurfacing on these roads. We plan on doing most of our microsurfacing within the residential neighborhoods in Topeka. This will be our 4th year of our program. The first year we started in central Topeka, and so our plan would be, we did central, then east, this year's west, that we start back in the central Topeka area again. And it would be again based on the PCI values that Jahan talked about. The range from 56 to roughly 85 would be the ones that we would concentrate on. Those are the ones we can have an impact with the microsurfacing. I would say we do get a lot of calls about people in neighborhoods that we did their neighbor's street and theirs is much worse. Why didn't we do theirs? Because theirs is much worse. This is a surface preservation. There's a point where it does no good, so there's not really a point to apply it. Major rehab, the projects that we show are Southwest 37th between Indiana and California. The design and inspection are both in-house. Construction estimate was $125,000. That's a mill and overlay restriping, and it does include a 10% contingency, estimated total of $125,000. South Topeka Boulevard between 25th and 29th. Again, design and inspection in-house. Construction costs are $360,000, and that does include significant base repairs. So depending on how much base repairs we have, the mill and overlay could be as $285 up to the $360. Southeast Deer Creek Parkway between 6th and 10th is the spring of 2021. It's along the Reachers property, going 6th to 10th. We're doing the Carnahan underpass this October, and this will tie into that. Design was $50,000. Inspection will be in-house. The construction estimate, again, $550,000, but the engineering firm estimated 1/2 for base repairs. And so the total project cost will be anywhere from $320,000 to $600,000, again, depending on base repairs. Highcrest neighborhood is one of the subdivisions that's identified on our heat map. I believe it has an overall PCI of 33, where our goal was 60, and right now we're currently at 64. It shows 33. This would be a multi-year project in the same style as we did Chesney Park, as well as Central Park over the last 4 years. Design, we estimated design at 10% of the construction, inspection at 12%, contingency at 15%. Our construction value is about $5.7 million for an overall project cost of $7.8 million. These estimates were based on Chesney Park and Central Park. I think I should have had Central Park there twice. What we did, we looked at all the streets we did within Chesney Park and Central Park and came up with a cost per square foot for those repairs across the subdivision, and that's what we use for both Highcrest as well as Central Highland Park. Within Highcrest, it's roughly 6.3 miles of road. We also looked at Central Highland Park, was another area on the heat map that showed that the project would be needed. But when you look at the 19.2 miles within Central Highland Park, that's cost prohibitive to say we're going to do that over 2 or 3 years. And so our recommendation on that one is in 2021, bring a consultant on board to work with Development Services, the neighborhood plan that's in place, and determine kind of a phasing plan for improvements within that subdivision. And I kind of laid out a rough order of magnitude of the cost if you just said we're going to do 19.2 miles. That ends up at $22.4 million. Southwest 30th, Southwest Highcrest. This is just on the south side of 29th Street, a little bit to the east of Fairlawn. These streets have asphalt curbs that are falling apart. The overlay is also falling apart. It'd be an in-house design. We would do an outside consultant to test what we actually have there. What we've experienced in areas like this, when we do a 2 or 3 inch mill, we get down to dirt. And so we'll do some cores before we get in there to make sure that we actually have something to work with. Assuming we have something to work with, a mill and overlay with some patching and curb replacements, $370,000. We put a 25% contingency because what we find in some of these existing neighborhoods, when we get in there and we start doing repairs, it's where do you stop? And so the estimate for that subdivision is $500,000. Other projects which actually in the CIP is Southwest Gauge from Emlyn to 6. It would be a design in 21 with construction in 22 for $750,000. And then the last one under the reconstruct has been approved in the CIP. It was scheduled for 2020. It's Southeast Quincy from 6th to 8th. But there is in working with Braxton and his folks in the water side, there's a water line and improvements and replacement needed with that project. And so for the mill and overlay base patching, it's $300,000. There'll be additional cost for the water line repairs. We'll also run the project up 7th Street to tie into the new plaza. There's about a half a block there that's in pretty poor shape. And so that'll all tie in together. As far as reconstruction, North Kansas Avenue, Morris to Soldier Creek. That is a half sand sales tax project. There's a water line component. It was actually originally scheduled for 2019. Again, it was a number of improvements to underground infrastructure that were needed. That pushed the project into mid-2020. We opened bids in August for that project. The contractor did what he would typically do. He waited till we had approved contracts to order the water valves, which is a 3-month lead time, so he'd get them about Christmas. And we felt that's a bad time to open up a road, and so we're delaying construction till the spring of 2021. Prospect Hills, we talked about at the last meeting, Southwest Danbury in Yorkshire. That's a project, again, with the water department. It's currently, I believe, out for RFPs. We are assuming a 12% design cost based on construction. Inspection would be done in-house. Construction estimate for the road is $1.5 million, so a total estimated cost of $1.7. Southeast California, again, we have actually a great working relationship with the utilities department. So this is a project that we're working with them on storm. And so the street part of that is roughly $280,000, but there's also the storm component. Southeast 6th and Golden, the next several are intersections. Southeast 6th and Golden, Southwest 6th and Jackson, and then if the next page, we have Southwest 29th and Kansas Avenue. Those are all estimated at roughly $250,000 to reconstruct those intersections. Next project, Southwest 17th between 470 and Wanamaker. There's a large countywide project scheduled for 23 to 25, which is 17th from McVicker to 470, but nothing from 470 to Wanamaker. It's a 3-lane concrete roadway that is, every joint has failed and needs to be replaced. So we show, again, a design either late this year or early next year, consultant inspection, construction roughly $600,000. We did put a 15% contingency. We estimate that project would be $850,000. And the last one under reconstruction is Northwest Furman Road. That's from Silver Lake northward, roughly a quarter mile. Design is at roughly $49,000, construction at $265,000. Again, we bumped up the contingency for not knowing what we'd find underneath, so it's a $380,000 project. The last couple items are the stopgap. It's joint replacement on 6th, and then joint replacement and partial depth patching replacement on Southwest 29th. And then there are a number of programs that we do each year, curb and gutter, an alley program, ADA sidewalk ramp program, and sidewalk repair, which is our 50/50 program. So, be open to any questions.
All right, I think under our, under the CIP resolution that was passed a few months ago, the cutoff is $250,000. So the projects that are 250, 251, we'll say, and over, ultimately have to go in front of the council with the project budget. So assume those will be coming back in front of the committee and then going to council, or what's your thoughts on that, Brian?
I think my plan would be at the October meeting is to kind of bring back basically a proposal for the committee for recommendation with all those projects on it.
Okay, sounds good. Some of those fall out, and as you mentioned, some of them were already approved in 2020. Any other questions? Councilwoman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question. I kind of spoke to Tony about this, and I hope I'm saying this at the right time. I'm excited about the I-70 on Carnahan, or Deer Creek. I keep calling it Carnahan, Deer Creek. But I spoke to Tony because I know that the plans and the designs have already been done. Have we looked at when the big trucks are turning off of Deer Creek onto 70 to cut that back? And Tony, you might help me with that wording.
The median.
Yeah, it's terrible, and I just hate for us to continually see the grooves in it from the trucks turning. It just doesn't seem
too short, and they jump over it, so be shortening the median, moving it.
Right, on the reconstruction between the ramps, we're completely reconstructing it and we're pulling the medians in. And so when the trucks make those turns, they won't be jumping over the medians. That was taken into account in the design.
You're shortening them.
Correct. So like I said, as you're heading south on Deer Creek and you want to go east onto I-70 right now, you're up and over the median, and we're eliminating, pulling those back so you won't be over those.
Thank you. I appreciate that because I know that my residents are just extremely happy that this is happening, you know, because it's just tore up so bad. And they don't want to see their tax dollars put a brand new median that those trucks, when they're turning, are going to tear it up. So thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Brian, do you have a rough estimate for how much work this is in total for 2021?
I went through it the other day, and I was thinking what I had total here was not including the 22 million within the one subdivision, but is around 14 to 15 million.
That's amazing, really. If you look back at the funding that's been available for street repair in the past, being able to spend 14 million, and I might note that a lot of that's focused on neighborhoods. I think it's a fantastic program that we've got outlined. So appreciate that. And we'll be looking forward to the individual projects as they come forward. Any other questions on that? All right, now we will move to the draft agenda. So you mentioned, Brian, you'd be bringing back some projects for the October meeting.
Correct.
I think it'd be great if we could have a presentation on facilities, maybe fleet and facilities next month. I don't know, I'd turn to the fellow members here. Mr. Padilla, anything in particular? We talked about fleet and facilities. We talked about the utilities, maybe some information on the plants. Okay, yeah, I overlooked that. Yeah.
No,
anything?
what I was interested in, you have on the list already.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I overlooked the draft agenda. So we've got alley program, curb and gutter program, ADA ramp, 50/50 sidewalk program, and then assuming there'll be some projects come forward. That looks like a pretty full slate for the next meeting. So maybe we'll look at November for facilities and fleet, and perhaps a quick discussion, Braxton, from the utility side, some plants or something like that.
Water and wastewater treatment.
Yeah, that'd be ideal. All right. Anything else from staff?
I want to say the date for that October meeting.
Yes. Liz, did we set a date last time for that meeting?
Well, not for the October meeting. We set it for today's meeting.
Okay.
It's great when we're all here together.
Yeah, let's maybe take a quick look at calendars. Perhaps the fourth week of the month, since we don't have a council meeting, might be good. I don't think there's anything we need to do ahead of council, so I'm looking at week of October 26th. Yeah, that looks good. What works for everybody? I think an afternoon meeting might be a little bit better if we can work that out. Maybe Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm available either of those days. Monday or Tuesday.
26 and 27 in the afternoon would work for me. I have morning appointments on both those days.
How about we look at Tuesday, October 27th, no council meeting that day. 3 o'clock, does that work?
Sure.
All right. I think we're set then, October 27th, 3 o'clock. All right, anything else? Brian, Bill, Brian?
Just on items from staff, I just wanted to let you guys be aware that we did get an application in for a 2020 KDOT Innovative Technology Grant. Christy, our city traffic engineer, worked tirelessly for about 2 weeks to get everything in on that. And in item number 7, you can see what it does, but it does allow us to get 24/7 traffic volumes and turning data, graphical summaries of signal system performance. And one of the things I like about it too, it's going to be kind of a help associated with the future Polk Quincy as far as signal timing along our corridors downtown, because we realize there'll be a lot of traffic that actually uses whether it's Southwest 6th or 10th Street. It's a great project. We've asked for the full $1 million in that, and we would be leveraging some funding we have for downtown signal timing as the city's contribution for that. So that's all I have.
I had one thing just to remind folks, is I think some of you know about this. We are also applying for a KDOT cost share program to complete our pedestrian improvements on South Topeka Boulevard between 29th and 37th. Yes, my person's gone. It's probably in the $1 million range to complete. It's less than that, but it's in that range to complete what hasn't been done out there. If you've been out there lately, you've seen a lot of sidewalk work on 29th and Topeka Boulevard. So that's coming up. We've got a lot of letters of support, and we want to thank the community out there that rallied around that. That's one of the things that KDOT asked us for, so we're giving it.
Great. One quick question, back on trails. Mm-hmm. My wife and I ride the trails pretty frequently, and the Landon Trail down around 37th there's been construction down there. I think it's a railroad doing something, perhaps.
Yes.
What's the time frame on getting that completed? Do you have any idea?
Time frame, I don't know. I believe that's BNSF putting a new tunnel basically over the bikeway. So I do not have a time frame on their project, but I can.
Slow.
Once we permit it, I'm not sure. We can probably look into that.
I realize that's really the county, but
it was county, it was city, and now it's railroad.
Okay. Thank you for that. All right. Any other items from the committee? Fantastic. I think we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. You're welcome.